Hi, this is Dale Cummins with Cummins Architecture and Design again, and we're going through some of the most common questions that we receive when we get a call from a new potential client. So I'm going to try and go through these with you today so that they will help give you the confidence to get your project done, to know that you're asking the right questions and developing a project in the most effective manner possible. So some of the questions we're going to cover today are, how much does it cost? That's one of my favorite ones. And my answer to that is, what is the word it? What does that mean? Because usually when somebody asks me that question at the first meeting, we don't even know what it is yet. So once we figure out what it is, then we'll get an idea of how to put it on paper. Once it's on paper to scale, then we'll know what the quantities needed are, and we will be able to give you an educated answer on what it cost to build it. So that's how to answer that first question, because generally there's not enough information on the first phone conversation to tell you what it costs to build. So that's kind of fun. Next, people ask, okay, what does it cost generally for design and engineering fees? I'm going to give you a textbook answer. This is qualified because every project is different. The scale and cost of every project is different. But generally speaking, for preliminary budgeting, it's a really good idea to use about 15 to 20% of the construction value for custom home work. And that includes the design, engineering, and for mechanical, structural, and plumbing would also be included in there. All the soft engineering costs could typically be covered for that. Now, if you have a very, very expensive high-end home, those numbers can change, but it's a good base number to work with. And interesting, what we've noticed is a lot of times when people are asking us these things, they're doing it from a limited background or understanding of what these projects are, and you'll get a quote from somebody, oh, well, I had my brother's uncle's sister do this for a lot less money. They're out of state, and what usually happens there is they might draw up a floor plan, but they're not putting together a full set of documents that you can use to actually go get a permit particularly in Southern California. It might work in some other states, but it doesn't work well here. So those numbers are, like I say, pretty much a textbook answer, and they're historical. If they're much less than that, we really can't be, we're not competitive, or we can't provide the services that you're looking for in order to do the best project possible. Some of the other items that you need to keep in mind is things like entitlement. Entitlement varies from city to city, but entitlement in the Los Angeles area, particularly the city of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles, or I'm just thinking we've done a project recently in San Diego. The entitlement fees alone may cost anywhere from 5 to 7% of the construction value, and that is just for the necessary work to run it through all the departments that will be involved in making the project and improving the project for construction. In some areas, and I don't mean to scare you, but in some areas there are as many as 15 to 20 different agencies that need to be notified and documents that need to be submitted in order for the project to be approved. Now, not all areas are like that, but it's just a case-by-case basis. Also, in some areas, we'll assist the homeowner, and they can do some of that legwork to kind of help keep the cost of the project down. But we'll talk about that more when we get into a specific project for you that we would be working on. So another question that comes up a lot is, what's the difference between design and what we call construction documents, or the term would be CDs to abbreviate it. The design/planning package generally includes the site layout to scale, the floor plans to scale, the elevations to scale, and typically a color board and several renderings to identify what the property is going to look like, generally from the street or from the street and the surrounding area. Those are the kinds of documents that will be used by the planning department, possibly in a public hearing, planning commission meeting. That identifies what it is that we are trying to build, and they will comment on it and tell us what we have to do or what changes we might have to make in order to get approval from them. Once we have planning approval, then we will start what's called construction document phase, or CDs for short. Construction documents actually explain to the contractor how the work is going to be done, what is expected to be included in that scope of work. In fact, one of the items in construction documents, right on the very front page, it will say scope of work. And we will describe what's being added, 2 bedrooms, bathroom, remodel the kitchen, whatever it might be, is right on the front page. So that's a good way, if you're ever looking at a set of drawings, to find out what the scope of work is. Just look at the scope of work statement on the front page. That helps a lot. So CDs will also include things like structural detailing, architectural detailing of railings, handrails, stairs, beams, those kinds of things. So it's much more detailed. Just for example, one of the custom homes we're working on now, a pretty good sized project. I think it had about 12 to 15 planning drawing documents, but once we went into the construction document phase, the number of drawings grew to about 48 or 50, just to give you an idea. So the front end planning, while that is defining the scope and scale of the project, the construction documents are identifying how it's going to get built, how it's going to be safe, how it's going to stand up in an earthquake, and those kinds of things. That package then gets submitted to the building department. They review it, comment on it, mark it up, send it back to us. We make whatever changes they think are necessary to conform to the California Building Code, and then we resubmit that. Sometimes that's several rounds. A lot of times we can get that within one round, but just based on the nature of the beast, sometimes it'll take 2 or 3 just to get everything lined up. Remember, every one of these projects is a custom project. We're not duplicating, we're not building tract homes, for example, where basically everything's the same except for the site. In this case, we're building and designing based on what you have existing, what you want to add, and it's going to be different in every case. So that may be helpful in terms of understanding what we're doing and how we're trying to accomplish it. Another question that's asked often is identifying the quality. How do we identify the quality of a project? Well, one thing would be like room size. When I'm speaking of that, not only the footprint or size of the room, I'll give you an example like a master bedroom. Master bedroom may be as small as 12 by 12 in a small project, might be as large as 18 by 20, or I've seen some even larger. If it gets much larger than that, it's more like you ought to have a pool table in there and a couple other things because it gets out of scale. But the size, also the vertical volume of space, the higher it goes, typically the more it costs to construct, but it gives you a grandiose scale. So the ceiling on a typical home is 8 feet. But in some places, it'll be 9, 10, or 11. Even if you look at the turn-of-the-century homes, it wasn't uncommon to have a 12-foot high ceiling. Of course, that impacts the cost of HVAC, which is heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. So the higher it goes, the larger the volume, the more square footage you're dealing with, and the bigger carbon footprint you generate, I guess you could say. So those things all need to be looked at and considered. Also, materials and finishes. Flooring, for example, could be wood, tile, marble, carpet. We prefer marble because we'd like to fly to Italy and personally select that material. That's always fun. I haven't had anybody take us up on that, but we always offer that in our design meetings. Just for example, flooring, wood floor. Wood floor, you can get a pretty good grade wood floor at $3.50 a square foot, but you can also spend as much as $28 to $30 a square foot. Now, obviously, it's really nice to have a high-end teak floor, but that actually might even be more than that. So There are different levels of material and then different costs for installing, and we take a look at that with you. Good quality generally pays for itself over time. There's life cycle costs. The higher the quality, the less maintenance typically you have to do, but you have to keep in mind your overall project budget when you're looking at those things. Just a couple other examples of quality. Big item would be windows, the type of windows that you're using, and we can help you select those. Those prices on windows can vary from as little as $300 for a standard window all the way up to $3,000 for the same size window, and there's lots of choices in between. But it's a nice place to use a few extra dollars to generate a higher quality finished product. Has to be looked at real careful with the rest of the budget. Another example would be balconies. Balconies with railings. You can do standard wood balcony railing, which is typically about the least expensive, can be built on site, or you can pick things like glass railings. You can pick frameless glass railings if you want to spend more, and you can even pick remote control glass railings that go up and down as you need to keep the weather and the wind off of your balcony. Really cool. I don't know how much they are, but I just saw one at one of the recent design shows. So there's all kinds of different levels of qualities and materials that you can use. Also, for example, roofing. You can go with a standard roof material, or you can which will last you typically about 30 years, or you can beef it up and get a 50-year roof. You can go with custom clay tile roof, multi-level, but the prices they go up as you move up the scale in terms of quality, and it has to fit into the overall project to make sense. So the next question that we get often is, what are the impact of the city fees? And that's going to depend on your specific location, your city, whether you're in the city or in the county. But just some of the examples are whether or not your project happens to be a high fire zone. If so, there are now plant material restrictions for reducing fuel for wildfires. They have exterior requirements for fireproof materials. Sprinkler requirements may increase. Fire truck access in high fire zones with fire truck turnarounds. Those are all specific requirements for particular sites. Another item that will come up are school fees. If the project is typically over 500 square feet, and it depends on where you are, you may have one set of school fees. You may actually have two school districts. And you may have the pleasure of providing some additional funds for the grade school and the high school. So that you have to check locally to find out. The good part about the school fees is that they are a one-time fee. It's like a developer fee, and they charge it based on the size of the project. Typically, they don't come into play until 500 square feet or more. But every city is different and circumstances change, so I'm putting a qualifier in there. That's general information. Some of the other things that you're going to want to check, or we will check with you if we do the project with you, are things like the water connection. Is there special fees associated with that? For example, there's one very unusual circumstance here in Rancho Cucamonga, north of the 210 freeway. They have fees associated with the drainage of the 210 freeway. So if you want to add to your house and you're on the north side of the 210 freeway, you're allowed to add up to roughly 650 square feet before that triggers or kicks in. Once that kicks in, there's a fee based on the amount of square footage or street frontage of that particular piece of property, so that you can help pay for the drainage of the highway. So that's called basically developer cost fees. Impact of city fees and some things that you might not realize that may come into play with respect to your project are things like water connection fee, a water meter. Particularly, or what comes to mind right now is if you were going to put in a tankless water heater, the size of the service of the gas might need to be increased. Also, the water meter may need to be increased. So those are some of the subtleties that we get into in design development as we move further in your project. Some other things are like power connection costs, off-site improvements. That's a very important one. We just had a client look at a project. They were going to develop a custom home on a single-family residential lot in Fontana. They bought it for a great price, but when they turned around, they realized they were going to have to put in $250,000 worth of road improvements. All of a sudden, the project didn't make economic sense. So we strongly recommend that before you get fully committed, if you're looking at a piece of property to purchase it, before you purchase it, talk to us. Maybe we can help you, even just as on a limited consulting basis, to do a quick review of what the requirements are, and particularly with respect to special city fees and off-site improvements. One of the other questions that's asked are the impact of the site conditions on price of the project. That's getting pretty specific, but a couple of general things to keep in mind. The steeper the property, the higher the cost in developing the foundation and the structural engineering for the property. We can build just about anywhere you want, but that's very important. Another one that's really important are soils conditions. Soils conditions will identify, or as soil engineering will identify the size and type of foundation necessary. There's lots of different types that we work with. Typically, residential will be able to work with a pad footing, slab on grade, or raised foundation. Those are pretty standard, and we just get a soils report to determine how much load the soil will accept to support the foundation for the structure that we're working on. But very important to do that early on the job, and that is site specific. Some of the other things are things like the view. Very important. You get the right view in the right location in the home, you will maximize its value. It's kind of funny. We're in a home here in Rancho that was in a development track, and unfortunately, it doesn't take advantage of the view of the beautiful mountain to the north of us called Cucamonga Peak. So we do get to see it when we're outside, but unfortunately, we don't get to see it in the living room, which is where I'd put the living room, so you could focus at the nicest elements on the site. That's one thing that you get to do if you're developing a custom home that you don't if you're buying a tract home. Check us out at our website, which is CumminsArchitecture.com. And have a great day. I hope to see you soon.